Why do you care so much what they think? No, really. Stop and ask yourself that question right now. Why does it matter if they misunderstand you, misjudge you, or think less of you? Is it because their opinion changes reality? Or is it because somewhere deep down, you've agreed to let strangers be the jury of your life? I've watched brilliant people destroy themselves, trying to win arguments with people who are never listening. I've seen good hearts turn bitter defending their innocence to those who had already made up their minds. And I've learned this. The war isn't out there. It's in here. The moment you stop fighting to be seen correctly, you become free. Not because people finally understand you, but because you no longer need them to. You've been taught that silence is weakness, that if you don't defend yourself, people will believe the lies, that your reputation, your worth, and your peace depend on making others see the truth about who you are. So you exhaust yourself explaining, justifying, correcting. You fight battles in your mind at 3 in the morning. You write texts you delete. You rehearse conversations that never happen. And despite all this effort, you still feel misunderstood. Most advice tells you to set boundaries or stand up for yourself. But that advice misses the deeper truth. The need to defend yourself is the problem, not the solution. It assumes your worth is negotiable. It treats your character as something that exists only in other people's minds. I'm going to show you something radical. Your peace doesn't come from being understood. It comes from no longer needing to be understood. This isn't about letting people walk over you. It's about recognizing that your integrity exists independent of opinion. When you grasp this, something miraculous happens. The people who matter see you clearly without explanation, and the people who don't matter stop having power over your peace. By the end of our time together today, you'll understand why defending yourself keeps you trapped in a game you can never win. You'll learn to distinguish between healthy communication and the desperate need for validation. And you'll walk away with a practice that brings immediate relief. The art of standing still while the storm passes, knowing that what is true needs no defense. This isn't about not caring what people think or becoming emotionally numb. It's about caring so deeply about truth that you refuse to reduce it to an argument. It's about becoming so grounded in your own moral clarity that other people's confusion can't shake you. This is dignity in action, the recognition that your worth is inherent, not earned through approval. Let me tell you about a moment that taught me everything. Early in my academic career, another philosopher accused me of stealing his ideas. The accusation was public, damaging, and completely false. My students looked at me with doubt. My colleagues waited to see how I would respond. The whispers started immediately. In the halls, in the lecture rooms, in the quiet corners where reputations are built and destroyed. Every fiber of my being wanted to defend myself. I drafted responses late into the night. I gathered evidence. I prepared a perfect rebuttal that would expose his dishonesty and restore my reputation. I imagined the moment when everyone would see the truth, when they would apologize for doubting me, when justice would be served. But then I stopped. I asked myself a question. What am I really defending? My ideas? No, they exist whether he acknowledges them or not. The truth of my work lives in the pages I've written, in the arguments I've constructed, in the logical consistency of my philosophy. His accusation doesn't change any of that. My character? No, it's demonstrated through decades of work, not a single response. Anyone who truly knows me understands my integrity. Anyone who doesn't know me won't be convinced by words alone. What I was really defending was my need for everyone to see me correctly. My need for universal approval. My need for every person in every room to think well of me. And that need, I realized, was a prison. So I said nothing. For weeks, the accusation hung in the air. Some people believed it. I could see in their eyes. The way they looked at me changed. Some people defended me without my asking. They spoke up on my behalf, citing my character, my history, my body of work. And some people forgot about it entirely. They moved on to the next scandal, the next controversy, the next drama. And me? I kept working. I kept teaching. I kept living according to my principles. I showed up to my lectures and delivered them with the same care I always had. I continued my research. I treated my students with the same respect. I engaged with my colleagues with the same honesty. Here's what happened. Within months, my work spoke louder than any defense could have. The students who mattered saw the truth, not because I convinced them, but because they witnessed my consistency. The colleagues who knew me never doubted, not because I explained myself, but because our years together had already established who I was. And the philosopher who accused me, his reputation suffered far more than mine ever did. Not because I attacked him, not because I exposed him, but because lies eventually devour themselves. When you build something on falsehood, it collapses under its own weight. Truth has structural integrity. Lies require constant maintenance, constant reinforcement, constant defense. And eventually, people get tired of holding up something that isn't real. I learned something profound in that silence. When you defend yourself, you're playing someone else's game. You're accepting their framing. You're operating within their narrative. You're giving them power to define the terms of engagement. But when you simply continue being who you are, you change the game entirely. You refuse to participate in the trial. You demonstrate through action what words could never prove. This wasn't about pride. It wasn't about being above the fray. It was about understanding something fundamental about human nature and truth. Your character is not a debate to be won. It's a reality to be lived. Now let me tell you another story. Imagine this. Someone you love misunderstands you completely. They think you're cold when you're actually protecting them. They think you don't care when you care. So much it hurts. They've built an entire story about who you are, and it's wrong. Every conclusion they've drawn is based on a misreading of your intentions. You lie awake, crafting the perfect explanation. You imagine the conversation where everything finally clicks. You rehearse the words that will make them see. You practice the tone, the phrasing, the examples you'll use. You anticipate their objections and prepare your responses. You build an entire architecture of justification in your mind. But here's what I want you to understand. That letter you're writing in your mind, the one that will finally make them understand, it's not for them. It's for you. You're not trying to change their mind. You're trying to prove to yourself that you're worthy of being understood. And that's the trap. Because the moment you need someone else to validate your truth, you've given them power over something they should never control. Your peace, your sense of self, your basic dignity as a human being. I'm not saying you shouldn't communicate. I'm not saying you should let people hurt you without consequence. I'm saying there's a difference between healthy communication and desperate defense. And if you can't tell the difference, you'll spend your life exhausted. Healthy communication says, this is who I am. This is what I value. This is what happened from my perspective. It's offered once, clearly, without attachment to the outcome. It's information, not persuasion. Desperate defense says, please see that I'm good. Please don't think badly of me. Please let me prove my worth to you. It's repeated, escalated, emotionally charged. It's begging, not sharing. One is grounded, one is begging, and you deserve to stop begging. So why do we defend ourselves so desperately? What are we really protecting? This question reveals something about human nature that changes everything. Here's the paradox. The more you defend yourself, the more guilty you appear. Not because you are guilty, but because defense operates on the assumption that there's a legitimate case against you. When you rush to explain yourself, you're unconsciously agreeing that your character is on trial. You're validating the premise that you owe others proof of your worth. Think about it. When someone accuses you of something you truly didn't do, your first instinct is often to defend yourself vigorously. But why? If you know the truth, why does their false belief shake you? Why does it matter what they think if you know what actually happened? Because somewhere deep inside, you've accepted that reality is determined by consensus, not by what actually happened. You've agreed to the notion that truth exists only when others validate it. You've internalized the belief that your worth is a democracy decided by popular vote. But truth doesn't work that way. Reality doesn't work that way. Your character doesn't work that way. If you're kind whether anyone notices or not. If you're honest whether anyone believes it or not. If you acted with integrity, you acted with integrity whether anyone acknowledges it or not. Your character exists independent of recognition. Your goodness doesn't require a witness to be real. The moment you grasp this, truly grasp it, defense becomes unnecessary. Not because you don't care about truth, but because you understand that truth doesn't need your anxiety to sustain it. This is what I call the tyranny of opinion. The false belief that reality is malleable, that facts bend to perception, that who you are is determined by who people think you are. And it's one of the most destructive lies we tell ourselves, because it makes you a slave to every misunderstanding, a slave to every bad faith interpretation, a slave to every person who refuses to see you clearly. You become trapped in an endless cycle of explanation and justification, trying to control something you were never meant to control. Other people's thoughts. Now, let me tell you something even more uncomfortable. Pay attention to what you defend most aggressively. It will tell you what you secretly doubt about yourself. If you rush to prove you're smart, you doubt your intelligence. If you need to convince everyone you're a good person, you question your own goodness. If you can't tolerate being seen as selfish, you fear there's truth in the accusation. If you become defensive when someone questions your motives, part of you questions them too. This is uncomfortable to admit, but it's liberating once you do. Because the solution isn't to defend yourself more convincingly. It's to do the inner work until you no longer need to defend at all. When you know who you are, when you've examined your conscience and found it clear, other people's misunderstanding becomes background noise, not a crisis. It becomes information about them, not a threat to you. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be honest with yourself, to look at your actions with the same clarity you'd apply to anyone else. To ask, did I act according to my principles? Did I do what I believe is right? Did I harm anyone intentionally? Did I violate my own values? If yes, then let that be enough. If no, then correct it. Not because someone called you out, but because you hold yourself to a standard. This is what I call the categorical imperative of self-knowledge. Act in such a way that you could stand before your own conscience without shame. When you do this, external judgment loses its power. Not because external judgment doesn't exist, but because it becomes irrelevant to your sense of self. Your conscience becomes the only court that matters. And unlike the court of public opinion, your conscience is fair. It knows your intentions. It sees your efforts. It understands your limitations. It judges you not against perfection, but against your own capacity for growth. Now here's where most people get confused. They think if you don't defend yourself, you're admitting the accusation is true. They think silence is agreement. They think not responding is the same as surrendering. But that's not how reality works. Your silence doesn't validate lies. It simply refuses to participate in a false trial. There's a profound difference between surrendering your truth and refusing to reduce it to an argument. So let me ask you again the question I open with. Why do you care so much what they think? And now, with everything we've explored, can you see that the question contains its own answer? You care because you've been taught to care. You've been conditioned to believe that other people's opinions define your reality. But they don't. They never did. Your reality is what you do when no one is watching. Your reality is whether you can sleep at night with a clear conscience. Your reality is whether you're living according to principles you believe are right. And that reality exists whether anyone acknowledges it or not. If this resonated with you, if you felt something shift, leave a comment telling me which lesson hit hardest. Was it the recognition that defense presupposes guilt? The understanding that you're not responsible for others' narratives? The realization that what you defend most reveals what you doubt most? Or maybe something else entirely? I read every comment, and your reflections often shape what I explore next. Because this isn't just me speaking to you. It's us exploring together. It's all of us trying to understand how to live with dignity in a world that constantly demands we justify our existence. And if you want more philosophy that doesn't just inform but transforms, that helps you see yourself and the world differently, subscribe and turn on notifications. Remember this, your dignity doesn't need a defense. It only needs you to stop abandoning it. Stand still, let your life speak, and watch what happens when you finally stop fighting battles that were never yours to win. The person you are when no one is watching is the only person you ever truly are. Make that person someone you're proud to be. Not because others will notice, but because you will know. And in the end, that's the only knowledge that brings peace.